In Kansas, 72% of fourth graders can't read at grade level. But what if the problem isn't the kids? It's the system that taught them. I'm Jesica Glover, and this is My Child Can't Read, a Heartland Crisis, a documentary-style podcast about how thousands of smart, capable children are being left behind and what parents and teachers are doing about it. In this season, we trace the forgotten history of reading instruction, hear from families who were told to wait it out, and uncover how widely used methods fail to teach the most foundational skill in education. You'll meet teachers who were taught but not trained, and students who were mislabeled, misdiagnosed, and nearly gave up. But there's hope, and it's already happening in Kansas classrooms. This is a story about loss, about learning, and about what happens when people refuse to give up on kids who struggle to learn to read right now. What if everything you believed about how kids learn to read was wrong? What if your bright, curious child started second grade already believing she was dumb? I'm Jesica Glover, a mom, a former reading specialist, and someone who couldn't read myself until the end of second grade. This podcast is for every parent, teacher, or grandparent who's asked, "Why can't my child read?" And today, we begin the story of heartbreak, of confusion, of systems that failed us, and of a path forward. A personal story. My daughter was 4 when I noticed it. She wasn't connecting letters to sounds, not the way I'd expected. By kindergarten, she still struggled, and I wasn't just watching as a mom, I was subbing in her classroom. Half the class, yes half, couldn't read by the end of kindergarten as the school expected. And by first grade, my daughter was placed in both reading and math pullout support groups. I kept asking, what is happening here? The school psychologist reassured me. Lots of kids reverse letters. She'll grow out of it. But I'd seen too much. I kept subbing. I kept watching. I kept worrying. By second grade, my daughter was in tears. Every morning, she begged not to go to school. She had major tummy aches, headaches, and slept horribly. And making friends became increasingly difficult as she became more and more concerned about how her peers didn't want to work with her or laughed when she tried to read in small groups. And she started saying things no 7-year-old should say. "I'm dumb. I'll never be smart, Mommy." I couldn't believe this was happening. Not to her. Not to me, a former middle school reading specialist. But here's the thing. Even I didn't know how to teach her to read. We tried everything. I mean everything. Refrigerator magnet tiles, flashcards, snack food letters, chalk, paint, silly alphabet songs, sounding out signs, cereal boxes, mailers. In desperation, I bought hooked on phonics, paid a private tutor that was an hour away, and rewarded every little bit of progress. But the sparkle in her eyes for being a curious learner was dimming quickly, replaced by an internal mantra of, "I am stupid." It was like grasping in the dark, and she was slipping away. When the system forgets the code. I grew up in the 1980s when whole language ruled the classroom. The theory was surround kids with books and they'll just learn to read naturally, the way they learn to talk. It sounded lovely. It wasn't true. I didn't learn to read until the end of second grade, when I was finally pulled out for special instruction. That's when someone finally taught me the code, phonics, sound letter connections, the building blocks. Later, when I got my reading endorsement, I wanted to help kids like me, but we never learned how to teach phonics. Instead, I was trained in the same failed system, cueing strategies. Look at the picture, guess what word would make sense. Skip it and come back later. I didn't know any better. Turns out, neither did the colleges and universities preparing educators.
My name's Jill Hodge. I am a retired public educator with over 30 years of teaching experience, and I'm beginning my 4th year as a public school board member. I'm also a trainer in the Andale Teacher Literacy Institute, which is part of Phillips Fundamental Learning Center. Well, it's been a while since I graduated. I thought I had all the skills that I needed. I was very excited. I had the desk all set up the way I wanted, the name tags on the tables, and I was fired up because I was going to blow my students away with how fantastic a teacher I was going to be. Boy, was I wrong. I had a semester in college of teaching methods. It was called teaching reading methods. And then a semester of children's literature. That's it. Never, ever heard anything about how you actually teach a child to read who's struggling. And just to show you how little I knew, I remember in that children's lit class, I had to read a Dr. Seuss book and then write a report about what I thought about the book. And I remember the comment I made was that this language is strange and confusing and I don't like it. Little did I know that that's the way it was supposed to be. The kids were supposed to have that repetition. They were supposed to have the rhyme. I had no idea. So looking back on how I thought about things, it's pretty embarrassing, but can only go up from there. So that's what I did. Yeah. I had absolutely no understanding about the structure of language, how the brain learned to read, none of that. Clueless. I remember we talked about methods, but there was really never, it was all theory. There was no application. How do you do this? I can't even remember. Obviously it has been a long time ago, but I can't remember ever being taught this is the way you teach a kid to read. So I loved college. It was wonderful. I was excited, but I was so ill prepared for those kids that came through my door. Never heard the term science of reading. I don't remember ever hearing phonemic awareness. I did understand decoding and I understood blending, but not really why they were important. I didn't understand that phonological skills built on each other, that they were in a hierarchy. Had no idea that you couldn't teach this skill to this age child. You needed to start low and build. No idea. We never discussed what happens in the brain during reading. My college was one of the most respected teacher education colleges in the area, so I thought I was getting a quality education, but I had no idea what I was doing.
A history of good intentions and bad ideas. Let's take a quick history detour. In early America, kids learned to read with phonics. Think Noah Webster and the spelling drills. But in the mid-1800s, reformers like Horace Mann called phonics harmful, pushing instead for whole word memorization. By the 1960s, the look-say method had taken over. Then came the 1980s and 90s, and with them, whole language, a feel-good philosophy built on the idea that if children just fell in love with books, reading would come naturally. But by the early 2000s, the pendulum swung again. President George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind Act mandated phonics, reigniting the reading wars. But you can't fall in love with something you can't do. Research in cognitive science confirms that struggling readers already know. Reading is not natural. Our brains aren't wired for it. It must be explicitly taught. But this isn't happening in enough Kansas mainstream classrooms. Listen to 10-year-old Austin Reed. He was taught balanced literacy, or cueing systems, in a mainstream school in Kansas before starting alphabetic phonics. Dr. Reid Lyon, neuroscientist and specialist in learning disorders and researcher, follows up by pointing out that good readers need clear and direct reading instruction based on the science of reading and not just philosophies. This clip ends with Austin reading after receiving 3 years of intense structured alphabetic phonics instruction, which resulted in significant improvements in his reading, writing, and spelling abilities.
Blake's is saw, g, o, ad. So glad. Blake is so glad. It, right? It.
At.
Oh. Last he has net his mom.
Blake is so glad. At last he is 10.
Out.
You're good.
10.
And the next sentence is his. You were right.
His mom has made him a.
So I try to keep that in mind. This child was taught through what we call balanced literacy or cueing systems. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. But when kids struggle to learn to read, you have to have more clarity. You have to have more directness, more intention to what you're teaching. And as hard as teachers work using some of these teaching philosophies and methodologies, we have to step back and ask, are their assumptions actually correct? What kind of science can we do to determine whether these different philosophies are actually based upon solid ground? You know, there's a couple of kind of, when you look at readers having a tough time, we have dyslexia. It does have a neurobiological base, I'll show you that. But we have kids that have reading difficulties that are iatrogenic, meaning the system caused them. Now that's a tough nut to swallow, but instructional disorders, that is not receiving the appropriate instruction as the kids are coming up, doesn't get to this. And so it's not just this youngster, Austin, is having a tough time learning to read. It's the fact that when he got to here, he was devastated. His spirit was gone. He hated school. His parents were just overwhelmed with grief. See, people don't understand what that does to a heart. And there's a lot of this going on. When you look out there at those graphs, take somebody into a classroom if they're doubting the data and link the piece of data with the human being. This is not abstract. So over my career, I've asked congressional members to go into a classroom because I can quack away with them during my testimony. But I ask them to come work with some kids, and some do. Some don't. They don't want anything to do with going in a classroom. They don't want anything to do with seeing the kids that are struggling. That's okay. But some do, and they see this, and it gives them a different perspective. I'd like you to take a look.
Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Prudent Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious because they just didn't hold with such nonsense.
You know, If people kind of get roiled up in this versus that, this instruction versus this instruction, that's okay. It's right there in front of you. And this happens millions of times when we apply the right instruction.
As a parent, I knew something was off, but I didn't know what to look for. Does your young child mix up sounds like saying "orfhead" instead of "forehead," or struggle with crayons, scissors, or using a fork? Confuse up and down or left and right? Have trouble focusing on spoken instructions? Walk or talk later than the other kids? Skip instead of run or struggle with rhythm? Forget the order of steps? Miss 3-part directions by age 3? Have trouble reciting songs or nursery rhymes? Struggle to remember the days of the week? Get frequent ear infections? Or write their name but can't identify the letters in it? If 6 or more of these sound familiar, your child might be at risk for dyslexia. I called Phillips Fundamental Learning Center, and it changed everything. They understood, they helped. You'll be glad you called. I know I was. Call 316-684-7323 or visit funlearn.org today.
The emotional toll. When schools don't teach reading correctly, children suffer. Confidence shatters. Behavior issues escalate. Parents blame themselves. Teachers feel helpless.
Hi, I'm Amy Johnston. I'm 18 and from Augusta, Kansas. I have dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and ADHD, but I've turned those challenges into purpose. I just graduated early in October 2024, and now I am a sophomore honors student at Newman University, getting my undergraduate degree in business administration with a minor in communications and marketing. Keep advocating for kids just like me.
So, Emmy, let's go back a little bit. What did reading used to feel like for you in school?
It was definitely a challenge, and it made me feel defeated. And more importantly, I felt stupid, just to be blunt. And I felt like I was alone, truly, and I had to hide my struggles for sure. And no one really noticed that I was dyslexic because I'm a girl. And I didn't really show that I was dyslexic because I hid it, and it was painful, honestly. I felt like I could do nothing, like I was never going to succeed. And that was really hard for me because my mom and my dad are really hardworking people and they're really successful, and so are all my sisters. They all have their own little things that they're great at, and I just felt like I was never going to be as accomplished as them. So then it ended up taking a toll on more than just my education. And that was what really affected me the most in the classroom, was just that voice in the back of my head saying, you will never be enough. When they take you out of the classroom and you do that little reading test, that was my least favorite day of the year.
Okay.
Because I couldn't even get through half a page, and I didn't read in the classroom. If they called on me to read, I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Or I would just be like, pass. No, not doing it. I would just act like I'm shy when I was never shy. Yeah. I mean, I was always outgoing in every aspect of school except for the actual learning part. And so I just didn't even read ever.
So when were you actually diagnosed? And then can you lead us into when did you actually start reading? Was it late middle school?
Well, so I was diagnosed in 5th grade.
Okay.
And so I started some phonics, and they came into my school, and they took me out of my class during silent reading time. It was hard for me to do that. I hated that idea. But once I started doing that, it did help. So that helped me a lot. And then I did kind of read slowly. So I could read, just I struggled a lot. And I wouldn't say that I was a fluent reader until I was 15. And that's when I transitioned out of high school, or 15, 16, maybe 7. I don't know. Like my junior year of high school.
Okay.
Sophomore, junior year. That's when I kind of figured out how to read well.
I've been that child. I've been that teacher. And I've been that parent. I remember driving an hour on school breaks to take my daughter to a reading tutor, even during Christmas vacation. The tutor looked at me and said, I don't know what's wrong. And I thought, if I don't know and I'm a trained reading specialist, what hope do other parents have? A glimmer of hope. The truth is, there's a code, and when it's taught, kids learn. We're already seeing it work in classrooms aligned with the science of reading, in schools that ditch guessing strategies and finally teach kids how print works. In future episodes, we'll meet the people making that shift. If your child is struggling to read, it's not your fault. And if you're a teacher who was never taught how to teach reading, that's not your fault either. But now that we know better, we can do better. Because reading isn't a mystery. There's a code. And when we teach it, kids learn. This episode uncovered how we got here. The next one, it's all about what comes next. Next time, we meet Janine Phillips, a teacher who discovered her own dyslexia just before graduating from college. When her son Cooper was diagnosed as profoundly dyslexic, Janine's quest to help him would change everything she thought she knew about reading. Her story might change you too.
I'm a parent who used to think that it was just my child, that maybe something was wrong with Austin or with me. But then I learned reading struggles aren't rare, they're everywhere. I'm Sarah Collins, mom to Austin, heard reading earlier in the episode, who's now excelling at his private high school after graduating from an alphabetics phonics program 5 years ago. My son Austin's dyslexia diagnosis changed everything for our family and showed me the power of connecting parents with the right support. That experience is what led me to the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center team, and I'm honored to have been a part of PFLC since 2017.
I used to think I was failing my students, that maybe I wasn't good enough to reach them. But no one ever taught me how to teach reading and how it really works. Not in college, not in training, not until I started asking questions. And here's what we both know now. Only 28% of fourth graders in Kansas are reading at grade level. Across the country, it's just 32%. And get this, 1 in 5 people worldwide is dyslexic. That's not a rare condition. That's not a race or income issue. That's not an intelligence or vision issue. That's 20% of us all over the world with brains wired differently for reading. Our kids aren't broken, and neither are we. What's broken is the way we're teaching kids to read. But here's the good news. Reading can be taught. Every child can learn to read. There is a code, and once we understand it, everything can change.
So here's your call to action. Ask how your school teaches reading. Ask if your child's teacher was trained in the science of reading. And share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, we are not alone and we are not to blame. What's broken is the way we teach reading, but together we can fix it. The good news, reading can be taught. There is a code, and once we understand it, everything can change. Thanks for listening to My Child Can't Read, a Heartland Crisis. If today's episode resonated with you, if you saw yourself, your child, or your classroom in these stories, you're not alone. We believe every child can learn to read, and every parent and teacher deserves the knowledge to help them. I invite you to take action today by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode, rate and review to help others find this series, and tell us about your story and discover how the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center is changing lives through literacy at funlearn.org/podcast. That's funlearn.org/podcast. And share this show with a friend, teacher, or fellow parent who needs to hear it. All resources, source credits, and tools mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. Remember, together we can rewrite the story, one reader at a time, right here in the Heartland.